I really like building worlds and making interesting worlds, and that's come from something like Gears of War. It wasn't Earth, but it was Earth. I was seeing all this interest in unique architecture that isn't in our normal day-to-day life. That was one of the first games where I was like, I would look to work on this. So that's probably what led me down the environment art route. So environment art is one of these things you are required to know a lot of things. That includes, modeling stuff, making materials, foliage, trim sheet, and then there's this part to environment art which sometimes I've looked, which is there's side communication, which is very, very important. I have to communicate very strongly with my designer, who will block out the space, and it's my job to make sure that whatever the designer had in mind works with the art as I do, and I have to work with my lighting artist to make sure like we are achieving whatever artistic vision we have. And on a day-to-day basis, I could be like in a piece of software making materials one day, the next day I'm sculpting up some rocks, some terrain, and then the next day I'm placing assets in the engine, doing the set dressing and world building. Is a very, very varied role. Where I got most of my education was through communities. The Dynasty Empire primarily was a Discord community run by Jeremy Estrelado, the lead environment artist at Ubisoft Massive, and that's where most of my education came. It was hanging out in there, speaking to people in there, asking questions, showing my work, getting critiques. Sometimes I feel like you're closer to an engineer than you are an artist. Sometimes it's a very technical field. You talk about things such as texel density and like normal maps and channel packing and shaders, and part of your education in game art is just learning the jargon and learning the language. When you're entering the industry, this changes over the course of your career, but early on, when you're trying to secure your first job, the only thing that matters is the work that you produced. Your portfolio is all that matters for that first job. You need to have good art suited to the studio you're going to. Be really deliberate, because your portfolio piece is essentially, it's there to answer questions. If you're applying for an environment art position, it's going to be a ton of questions that a recruiter has. Can this person do textures? Can they model? Can they do hard surface? Can they do trim sheets? Can they do foliage? All these questions are there, and if each one of your portfolio piece answers a question, then you're making yourself far more employable. You don't answer all the questions in one gigantic portfolio piece. You can answer only one question. Like if you wanted to learn to do snow, you can do that on a portfolio piece, establish and show that you can do a snowy based scene and a shader and some snow materials, and then on the next scene you could do like, I want to show like Houdini skills. You can use each project as an opportunity to showcase your ability. It doesn't have to all be a one giant project, because that tends to be when people do one giant project, that's when they get burnt out. Like the project doesn't get finished. So being deliberate and I'm doing this portfolio piece because I want to learn XY skills, because it'll help me get a job at XY studio. When you're being deliberate like that, it can really help you focus up your portfolio. And by doing so, you're not alienating any jobs either. Like if you focus up your portfolio to be catered towards post-apocalyptic urban areas, so you're building towards a Ubisoft Massive on the Division. By building towards that, it's not like every studio no longer finds you as interesting or as a possible candidate. It helps focus you a little bit and helps you cut out the noise of other studios. One of my favorite things to see in portfolios and in art in general is the work in progress shots, where they show their first block out and they show like key stages through the development of the space. You have your art sheet pass, where you kind of do your artistic blocking and you can have your composition in a general space, and seeing them little ideas sort of develop and become something is really cool, especially if there's like work or a particular idea you suggest and it finds its way into the game. And it all started with this random little idea or this random image you were referencing, and you kind of see it grow into this thing. It's very rewarding. I think one of the bits which is really satisfying as well is you are making lots of jigsaw pieces. If you're working on a material or you're working on props or you're working on a trim sheet or anything, in isolation they can be fantastic, but they have to come together and look okay side by side. And when you nail that, when you have a cohesive environment, like if you could really tell, and it is one of the most satisfying things you can do in this job.